Hey everybody, it is Professor Parish, and I apologize for this video being late this week. I am working on grading paper 2, so midterm is over. I hope you had a good weekend, and I am in the midst of grading your second paper, so some of you may have already gotten my feedback back. If you have not, don't worry, I am grading. I'm actually going to go back to grading after I'm done recording this video, so you should, by the end of this week, have a graded draft with my feedback on it. So, lots of things to look forward to. If you do decide to revise paper 2, and I will note in my feedback whether or not I think you should. If I don't say anything about it, then you're probably fine, unless you want to revise. But if I note that you should revise, I would highly encourage you to, because you can make up those points. Revisions for paper 2 are due by Sunday, November 3rd. So just it's a few weeks to revise, but that gives you the opportunity to get a better grade on the second paper. Usually the poetry paper is the most challenging because it's so kind of different than any other writing we do in the class, and it shakes things up a little bit in the course. So as you will see this week in our lecture video, paper number 3 is a bit more traditional. So if you're really worried about your poetry paper and you're like, this is stressing me out, don't worry. Paper 3 will get back to the basics, and I'm looking forward to going over drama and starting that with you all today. So I've got my diet soda. I'm gonna crack that open and get down to drama. Start talking about that, right? Exciting. We are on the last genre of our class, because the last section we do in this course is about the research paper. We'll get to it, don't worry. This is our last section of discovering types of literature. So if you liked fiction and you like poetry, now we're going to get into drama. And I actually had a lot of students this semester say that they didn't like drama, which is amazing. I don't know if people were thinking like drama, like Mean Girls gossip drama, or actual plays dramas. Even though this is drama, is what our unit is called, it will go over a lot with theater. It'll go over Greek tragedy, Shakespearean plays, American dramas, comedies, things like that. So it's basically going over plays. And I will be honest, we spend the least amount of time in this unit for 2 key reasons. One is that SIC actually offers a lot of theater classes. We have practicums, we have intro to theater or theater appreciation, which will expand on what we're talking about in this unit. We also have intro to drama, which is the English version of theater appreciation. So if you like this part of the class and you're like, man, I wish I could read more plays and talk about it some more, then no worries. Intro to Drama, English 243 is the class for you. And it is. I took it when I was at SIC and it was a lot of fun. But I'm an English major, so I think plays are cool. But we do have several theater classes, so because of that, we don't spend a whole lot of time on drama. It's just a nice preview of it, so that if you want to carry on, you can take future classes. The other reason we don't spend a lot of time in this unit is because I want to give you more time to work on the research paper, which, trust me, when we get to the research paper, we're going to talk about that, and I highly encourage you, make sure, tell your friends that are in this class, watch the research video that I'm going to do when we get to that last section. It's going to be a doozy, but it's going to be awesome. So if you have friends that are in this class and you know they've not been watching my lecture videos and you've been sternly telling them that they should, remind them, one, to watch this video, of course, but also tell them that, yeah, when we get to the research paper, you're going to want to watch that video, because we'll have a lot to talk about. So speaking of which, let's dive in to our third unit for English 122. I'm going to put myself down here in the bottom corner here. I'm going to set myself right there. Hello. And let's just go over what's due this week. So, let that page load. I'm going to really hope I don't burp in this video. Alright, so going down to week 10, you only have 2 assignments due this week. One is going to be your paper number 3 thesis statement, which we're going to go over. And the other is going to be the discussion forum for week 10. So it's a pretty easy week. whoop, whoop, get back from midterm, and you're like, man, I stressed out over all my exams. I just want an easy week in English 122. You are in luck, madame or sir. So let's look at the discussion forum real quick for this week, and then we'll also look at the paper thesis. So the discussion forum for this week, if I look at it, basically, and some of you have already done it. Yeah. Kudos to you all. What you'll need to do is that you will need to pick 2 terms from chapter 26, which we're going to go over today, and explain how they have applied to your choice of play from the chapter. So chapter 26 is our preview chapter, so you're going to pick a play. You're going to pick 2 of the terms from the chapter, and you're going to explain how those 2 terms apply to that play that you picked. Also, you're going to give me your opinion on how plays are different than fiction and poetry, and you can use the play that you picked as an example. And then finally, our book discusses myth and illusion, like we do in poetry. What is myth and what's illusion? So how do you think, we talked about myth and illusion in the last chapter of poetry, how do you think those 2 terms are going to translate over into drama? And so you can give me your answers to those. So there's a lot of questions this week to ask, but, there I go, but you do get a chance to give your opinion, and you get to pick out your own play to use as a discussion point. So should be a fun and interesting discussion post. There's so many options that I'm excited to see what you and the rest of the class decide to choose. I really did enjoy the last discussion forum, so I'm excited to see what you all put down for this week. So that's one assignment. The second is looking at the thesis statement for paper 3. And let's talk about paper 3. So I've got the guidelines pulled up here. I'm going to bring them over here. Okay. So, like I said, this is a very traditional paper in comparison to our poetry paper. Basically, I am going to talk about the creative writing option because I've already had a student ask about that. I'll get to that in a moment. But typically what most students do for this third paper is that you're going to pick one play out of our Discovering Literature textbook. One play. Now, if you are a theater nerd and you like plays, and you, like myself, have several screenplays in paperback or hardback form, and you would like to do one of those, you are welcome to do so. Absolutely. It does not have to come, the play does not have to come from this book, from our textbook, but it does need to be a play. So, you can pick any play you like, but the easiest thing to do is pick one from our book, because there are a lot of plays in this book, and so you should have plenty of options. But if you have a play that you like, you have a hardback copy of it, then you're welcome to do so. Or if you have a screenplay that's in hardback form. For example, I have The Grand Budapest Hotel, the screenplay in hardback form. So it's a Wes Anderson film, but it's a screenplay, and I have that actually in print. And so if you had something like that, you could use it. But essentially what you're going to be doing is after you pick your play, you should obviously read it. Or if it's a really long play like Hamlet or Macbeth, you can use summaries, analyses, video reviews, film adaptations, etc. You should have a variety of options depending on how well known your play is, and then your job is to analyze the play and answer the following questions about it. So, for example, if you choose Hamlet, you can choose like an adaptation of it. I know BBC, the British Broadcasting Company, does a lot of film adaptations of Hamlet. If you like The Taming of the Shrew by Shakespeare, 10 Things I Hate About You is basically the movie version of that. So if that's kind of towing the line, because you'll need to use the screenplay for this paper if you're going to go that route. But what I'm saying is you have lots of options to choose from. So the 3 questions that I would like you to answer about the play that you choose are: 1, analyze the play in terms of character, setting, and theme, and explain how character, setting, and theme are used in your play, because those are very essential elements of a play that you have to have. You have to have a setting, you have to have a theme, you have to have character. You can talk about other elements like plot, about style, about, how the play looks. You can talk about those things as well, but I definitely want you to touch upon character, setting, and theme. Absolutely. If you want to add the other elements in there, go for it. Question 2, what type of play is the one that you picked? Is it modern American? Is it Greek? Is it Shakespearean? If it's not one of these, is it a term from our textbook, or such as comedy, tragedy, or intrigue? And then what makes it fit into this category? So if you're doing Taming of the Shrew, well, that's a romance and a comedy. So I'd want you to explain, well, why is Taming of the Shrew a comedy? And you would use examples from the play to back up your reasoning. You'd explain yourself. That's answering question number 2. And it can be a mix. It can be a tragedy as well as Shakespearean, or it can be a classical Greek play as well as a comedy. You just need to explain yourself in question number 2. And then finally, what drew you to this play? Why did you pick this play? And what should the reader take away from it? So why did you pick the play? What was your reasoning there? And then what should the reader take away after they get done reading the play? So what's the overall theme or purpose? So yeah, those 3 questions your paper should answer, and then explain any details about the play that you think are important for your audience to know. So page length, 3 full pages. We're back to a standard 3-page paper. Enjoy that 3 pages while it lasts. When we get to the research paper, it's going to be a different story. But savor those 3-page papers. So 3 pages at least. It can go over. 1-inch margins, 12-point legible font. Some of you are towing the line on that 12-point, like you're using Verdanda. And Verdana, I'll show you what that looks like. Yeah, so typically, if I do a 12-point font, yeah, so this is Arial and 12-point. It's a little big. I'm okay with it, but you're really towing the line. If I chose a classic font, like I like Georgia, and Georgia's a little big, but I like Georgia. I would recommend using Georgia. It's a good font. Some of you use Verdana. Let me show you what that looks like. Yeah, look at Verdana. Look how big that is. Look at that. That is not 12-point. It's a faux 12-point. Don't use it. If you are trying to fool me into thinking that you've chosen a 12-point font, but you've strategically chosen a larger font, I'm going to take off for it. I was a college student at one time. Don't try to fool. But anyway, you should cite an essay format. You should have an introduction, a conclusion. You do need to cite your textbook in this paper. Some of you have not cited your textbook in paper 2. You need to do it in paper 3. And if you've not watched the MLA video that I posted on our page that goes over how to cite an MLA, you need to watch that video. But you'll need to cite your textbook, and if you use any other sources. You need to cite those, have in-text citations, all that good gravy, right? So we'll have a thesis statement that's due this Sunday. Next Sunday, the outline will be due. And then the draft will be due the next weekend. So you only get 3 weeks to work on this paper as opposed to 4 weeks like before. But like I said, the reason for that is I want to give you extra time to work on the research paper. Okay? And we're going to start the research paper about mid-November. So it's gonna be here before we know it. So, but in past years of me teaching this course, I can tell you that this is probably the easiest paper in the class to write, because your plays give you a wealth of information to go off of. There's tons of plays in our books to choose from. There's tons of poetry terminology you can pick through. So this really is, I've had a lot of students tell me that this is a very easy paper for them to get through. So that's good news, right? It's a nice calm before the research paper storm. It's not going to be a storm. It's going to be fun, but just bracing you for it. And then as our last papers have been, this paper is worth 100 points. Your intro conclusion is 20 points. Grammar and spelling is 35. Your analysis and the content of your paper is 30 points. And then the formatting and page length is 15. And I'm including works cited in that 15. So you'll notice that I'm starting to add more points to the formatting and page length section. And that's because we're getting more and more into MLA. This number is going to explode when we get to our research paper. So this is kind of your last chance. If you've not been doing MLA until this point, you need to get on board with the MLA bandwagon, because we're going to be doing a lot with MLA over the next several weeks. All right, so that's paper 3 guidelines. I've read a lot of really good papers. I've seen lots of different plays being talked about. There is a creative writing option. So I had a student ask, can I write my own screenplay that is 3 pages long or more? And the short answer is yes. Yes, you can. If you want to do a creative writing option where you create your own screenplay, absolutely. You can write a 3-page screenplay. What I will ask, though, is in lieu of this formatting part, I will ask you at the very end of your screenplay to cite our textbook. And that way, you'll get credit for citing your textbook just like everybody else, but you are able to create your own screenplay. And in that screenplay, I'm going to be looking at formatting. I'm going to assume that you're going to, from our textbook, learn how to write a screenplay and know how things should be formatted. And we'll talk a little bit about these in our chapter, in our lecture videos. But that your screenplay is formatted correctly, that the grammar is correct, that it shows elements of poetry being used, or not poetry, of drama being used. So for example, I'm going to look at your screenplay and there should be some characters, there should be a setting described, and there should be a present theme. So it's going to be basically like what I did with paper 1, where if you wrote your own short story, I looked at all those elements of fiction and how they were in the short story. I'm going to do that with your screenplay. And I'm also going to want your screenplay to have the traits of either American theater, American modern theater, Greek, or Shakespearean. Or you could do a comedy or an intrigue. But I want your play, if you choose to write your own screenplay, I want it to specifically have markers that show me that it is a certain genre present. Okay? And if you decide that you want to write your own screenplay and you have questions, you can absolutely call me, email me, stop by my office. You can do that at any time, and I'll be happy to go over that with you. But that's just what you need to do if you're writing your own screenplay for paper 3. All right? Makes sense? Cool. So that's paper 3. The last thing I want to talk to you all about today is going over the first couple slides in this presentation. We're going to go over chapter 26 only. So we're not going to go through this entire slideshow. We're just going to go through the first couple of slides and talk about the preview chapter for the Heart of Drama, or chapter 26. And it starts, we're already past the 1,000 mark, it starts on page 1131. So, the big question is, live theater versus film versus traditional text, or books. So our chapter starts out, we've looked at books, we've looked at poetry, and through poetry we've looked a little bit at spoken word, and how when we say these poems out loud, their meanings can change. The last discussion forum we did, a lot of you had some really cool posts about how poetry is different when it's spoken out loud versus when you read it, and theater is very much like that. Now we are going to, in one of our future discussion forum posts, look at some actors talking about the difference between film and theater. And one of the big things they will note is that film is, film can be edited. Film can have takes. You can, if you're not doing a good take, you can stop and start all over again until you get the right acting at the right time, and then you can kind of edit and cut it together and make a movie that looks good. A book, you can edit it, you can go through drafts, and you can change things, you can rewrite things, you can alter entire sections of it, and your audience has no clue that you've even done it, because the published version, the final draft, is all they will ever see. And the same thing is true of a film. The final draft of that film, the final cut, is what the audience is going to picture. So they don't get to see all that behind the scenes turmoil and work that you've had to do. They just see the final product. Live theater, though, live theater, there is no editing. There's no, oh wait, we messed up our line, let's stop and start over from the beginning. Live theater, there's an audience there watching you. And if you mess up, you just got to roll with it. So I am going to ask several of you in some of our future discussion forum posts, have you ever done theater before? When I was at SIC, I was in a couple of plays there, and you very much had to just go with it. Like, just go with the flow. If something bad is thrown off, you just write it. I remember we did Carousel at SIC, and there was one guy, he had the one line that would start one of our big song numbers. It was like our biggest song and dance before intermission. And he had to say this one line to cue the music. And on opening night, he forgot the line. He couldn't remember the line. And the orchestra is waiting on him to say that line to start playing music. And he couldn't remember. And it was so awkward. And finally, we were all just sitting there like, he's not saying it. What is he supposed to say? And finally, a girl that was on stage, she was like, oh, don't you think we should? And then cued the music and cued the line. And then we just went from there and we just rode on with the song and dance number. But it was one of those things like in the moment, you're frozen and somebody has to take action and keep the story going, keep the wave going. And so that's a big difference than like a film or a book. One of the terms that we go back to is soliloquy and monologue. And we talked a little bit about monologue in the fiction unit. A soliloquy, try saying that 5 times fast. A soliloquy is an entire scene of internal dialogue. So there are scenes in Hamlet and Macbeth where in Hamlet, for example, he's talking solely to himself for an entire scene in Hamlet, where he's scheming or thinking about what his uncle has done to his father or how he's married his mom. He's internalizing all this conflict and saying it to us, the audience. That entire scene is a soliloquy. Whereas a monologue is just a moment. That's how I remember. A soliloquy is a scene, S and S. A monologue is a moment, M and M. And so a monologue is where a character just internalizes some dialogue in a scene, but it's not the entire scene. So, for example, in Beauty and the Beast, when Gaston has tried to propose to Belle and she basically boots him out of the house, she kind of has a little internal monologue for a second where she's like, ugh, like, why would I even marry him, etc., etc. And then she breaks into a song number. So a monologue is just a moment of internal dialogue that then carries on into a scene. An aside is when characters literally take other characters to the side of the stage and speak to them in private. And that's kind of a thing about a play that's different than a book and a film. In a play, it's very much, reality is somewhat suspended because there's only so much room on a stage. So the audience has to understand that when two characters go 5 feet from everybody else, they are out of hearing range. In reality, yeah, the entire town could totally hear what they're saying, but in the moment on stage, we have to assume and treat that like it's something private or secret, because there's only so much room on that stage. So that's an aside. And then a confidant is the secret keeper of the play. They are entrusted with specific knowledge that will get revealed at some point throughout the play. And usually the confidant is the bearer of bad news, or they're the cause of the conflict. The entire play's conflict revolves around them, typically. So they have a pretty important part to play. Foil is my favorite poetry, or not poetry, I keep saying poetry in this video, my favorite play terminology. A foil is not, we're not talking about math foil, we're talking about drama foil. A foil is when you have two large personalities playing off one another. So my favorite example is if you see a buddy cop movie, and you know buddy cop movies, there's always like the old cop, like the stern, by the book, he's been there forever cop, and then there's the young, rebellious, rambunctious cop that's like gonna break all the rules, and their personalities totally clash the entire movie, but by the end they're like best buds forever. That's a foil. In David Fincher's movie Seven, it's Morgan Freeman's cop character Somerset, and it's Brad Pitt's character Mills. They're a foil. In Batman, the Batman films, it's basically Gary Oldman. It's him as Gordon, Commissioner Gordon, and it's Batman. Batman's not technically a cop, but they're kind of a foil together. In the Harry Potter series, it's Draco and Malfoy. They are foils. They are two large protagonists, bigger than life characters, but they have, disassociating, diverse personalities. Okay? So they're just two large personalities that play off one another. And you can probably think Woody and Buzz in Toy Story. That's another example. That's a foil. So you will be asked on the exam and on our final exam to explain what a foil is and give me an example. Don't be that person that writes the math definition down. Because I did have somebody one semester, when it got to the final, they gave me the math definition. And I did not give them a point. So, yeah, you can think of a lot of examples that match this, but it's just two large personalities that kind of butt heads, but go hand in hand in the story. Complex characters, they're basically round characters that we talked about in fiction. They're multidimensional, they're complex. Recognition is when a character gets self-realization or they gain knowledge about themselves in the play. Usually it's around the climax, usually around the third act. Most plays are split into acts 1, 2, and 3, or at least into acts 1 and 2. And usually by the end of the second or the third act, they're getting that recognition. They're realizing something about themselves. And then we have the term idiom, which is a common phrase of a culture or language. And that may be confusing or hard to think about, but the American English has a lot of idioms. And if you're not a native speaker to English, idioms can be confusing. My friend in college, her and her friend, they would teach a summer class, and they taught some students from South Korea. They would come over here to where I transferred to, and they would come to that college and would take an English course over the summer. And so my friend and her friend, their jobs were to work with the South Korean instructor, and their goal for the summer was to teach South Korean kids American idioms, which they said was actually very hard. Because, for example, they would explain the phrase, "Oh, I'm just kidding." And the South Korean students would go, "What does that mean? What do you mean you're just kidding? What does just kidding mean?" And we don't think anything about that because it's an idiom. It's a phrase. Just kidding means I'm joking. I'm not being serious. But for the students that were international, they were not native English speakers, and just kidding, they had no clue what that meant, and it was weird to them. And finally, one student goes, "Oh, do you mean tradition of the joke?" And my friend was like, "What is that?" And they're like, "Oh, well, just joking is tradition of the joke. That's what we call it." And so it was that kind of that culture barrier there. That's an idiom. So we take those for granted so much in our language, but it's so true. We just make up phrases and words, and they have alternate meanings. And if you're not a native speaker, it can be really hard to understand those. So we see a lot of idioms present in plays, and that helps us as the audience understand the culture or where that play is coming from. On page 1138, I want to bring this play up. It is Don DeLillo, The Mystery at the Middle of Ordinary Life. And I want to bring this up because this is a play. It's very short, as you can see. It's only one page long on page 1138. It is a one-act short play, but it actually uses a lot of elements of storytelling. So I want you to pause this video and read this play. And when you're done reading the play, come back to this video. So I'm going to give you a second to do that. Just press pause, read The Mystery at the Middle of Ordinary Life, and then come back to this video. And I'm going to take a sip of soda while you do that. All right, we're good? Okay. So, Don DeLillo wrote this in 2001, so this play is about 19 years old. It's almost 20 years old. But I think it's pretty pertinent. I think it's very important. There are only two characters. These characters are not rounded. They are not multidimensional. Their names are literally man and woman. They're two characters alone. As you can see, we have no setting. If you're getting Hemingway vibes from this play, you are in the right place, my friend, because there's no setting. The plot is extremely minimal. It's very internalized conflict. And what are these two characters discussing? Well, at the beginning, the woman and man are clearly, in my opinion, having a midlife crisis. Like, they're both, which relates to Mystery at the Middle of Ordinary Life. So it's this normal couple. They've been married for a while. They're both in their middle age, and they're having a crisis. And so they're talking about how the woman is just going on and on about, like, how do we stay in relationships with one person? How do we deal with that? And blah, blah, blah. And you can tell the guy is just really not having any of it. He's just like, I really don't want to listen to you have this existential crisis. I just want to have a small basic conversation. And so by the end of it, the dialogue starts out extremely complex, and as the play goes on, it gets more and more minimal. So you can see there, he's like, "I'm still not over this cold of mine." And she's like, "Those things you take." And he's like, "The tablets." And she's like, "The caplets," like correcting him. And he's like, "Long day." And she's like, "Long day. A good night's sleep," he says. "Long, slow day." and then it dies down. So it's basically she's having this crisis, but at the end of the day, she's still back to where she's not changing anything. So it is very similar to Hemingway in terms of minimalism, and also in terms of leaving a lot up to the audience. Like, we're supposed to determine, what's their relationship, what's their conflict, how do they resolve it. I mean, a lot of that's left up for us to decide. And a lot of this we have to look at, is it internal conflict or external conflict? Is this conflict, this entire scene, happening in the wife's mind, and then the last two parts are what she actually says to her husband? Or are these all external things happening? Is this entire conversation happening in real life? Don DeLillo doesn't spell it out for us. We have to kind of determine that for ourselves. So you can see here that plays can be just as mysterious and ambiguous as poetry, but they can also be just as literal and imaginative and expansive as fiction or nonfiction. I mean, drama is kind of that midway point where it can be one way or the other. And I think that's why a lot of people like drama and like plays, because of that. So there's a couple other terms that I want to go over with this chapter that are on the next couple pages. Deus ex machina is actually a very, very common play term, and it's Latin for Deus ex machina is Latin for God machine. And in ancient Greek times, the idea was that at the climax of your play, your protagonist would be like on the edge of a cliff, about to fall to their doom, and then a Greek god would swoop in, like Apollo in his chariot, and would just swoop in, like scoop them up and take them away and save them. And so it was a plot device that basically got characters out of danger at the last minute. Some of you may call that poor writing, but the Greeks called it a deus ex machina. And we're still using the deus ex machina today. It is still being used in modern plays and screenplays. And some examples. I can give you some modern examples. In Toy Story 3, when Woody and Buzz and all the toys are like holding hands, they're about to fall into an incinerator to their doom. The little alien squeaky toys that have been in none of the rest of the movie, they just swoop in on their little claw machine and save Woody and Buzz and the others, and then we never see them again. It's like, oh, thanks, squeaky alien toys. Ciao, bye. Deus ex machina. Jurassic Park. Two velociraptors. They got Laura Dern and Alan Grant all covered up. They're about to chomp them down. Who shows up? A giant T-Rex. Takes the raptors out. Saves our characters. Boom, day saved. Deus ex machina. How'd that T-Rex get in the museum? Doesn't matter. Deus ex machina. That is prime examples. And you can probably find other examples of last-minute saves that have happened in movies and stories and screenplays. It's a common term. We're still using it today. Subplot. We see subplots throughout plays. They're just extra small little plot points that may or may not connect to the rest of the play as a whole, but the idea is that they're enriching the play and giving it more depth and detail. An ode is a tribute, often sung by a chorus in a play. Several plays have choruses, which are just groups of people. In Greek plays, the chorus's job was to relay information. We've seen some modern examples of this. In Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, the townspeople form a chorus at the beginning of that play and basically give an ode to Sweeney Todd through their opening number. So there's an example there. Rhymed couplets, 2 lines in a play that end in rhyme. Guess who does this? Shakespeare is well known for using his rhymed couplets because Shakespeare is not only a playwright, but he's also a poet. So you may often see that throughout his work. All right, so we're going to stop there. I know you all are dying to get to Greek tragedy, but we're going to pick that up in week 11 and wait for that then. So I hope that you have liked our diving into drama. As you can tell, I get really excited about it. We recently had a really cool play here at SIC, and so that got me really excited about this unit because I'm like, oh, we get to talk about plays now. So we're only going to spend 3 weeks on it, but it's going to be 3 good weeks. And we've got a lot of good content to cover. We don't have a lot of drama chapters, so the presentations are going to be really rich, and I'm excited for you all to see them. If you've not watched the MLA video, please take time this week to watch it. It is definitely going to be worth your time, especially with the assignments we're going to be doing in the future. But otherwise, you just have your discussion forum, and you just have your paper 3 thesis. to outline and deposit in the Dropbox. And then we'll save the outline for next week. But if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. I'm always available through email, and you can also call me, and if I'm available, you can stop by my office. All right? I'll talk to you all again soon. Have fun delving into plays this week, and I look forward to reading the rest of your paper number 2s and your work this week as well. See you all. Bye.